A nobleman with a guaranteed career at the papal court would give it all up to found an order that lived entirely on alms, trusting blindly in providence. The Church celebrates today, August 7th, Saint Cajetan of Thiene, priest and Catholic reformer, who died on this same day in the year 1547. Born in 1480 into a noble family of Vicenza, Cajetan studied law in Padua and served in Rome as an apostolic protonotary, a path that could have brought him prestige and comfort for the rest of his life. But he was ordained a priest in 1516 and turned his back on that career, devoting himself to prayer, liturgy, and direct service to the poor and sick. In 1524, together with Gian Pietro Carafa, the future Pope Paul IV, he founded the Theatine order, which renounced fixed income and lived entirely on God's providence. During the sack of Rome in 1527, soldiers seized and tortured him, wrongly believing he hid treasure. He hid nothing. Later, in Naples, he cared for the poor and insisted on reforming the clergy through his own example, not through words. He died in 1547 and was canonized in 1671. He is invoked as patron of the unemployed and job seekers. A surviving letter of his sums up his entire life: "It is not by fervor of feeling, but by fervor of deeds, that souls are purified." On this same day, the Church also keeps the memory of a pope we've already told you about, Saint Sixtus II, whose martyrdom actually happened on August 6, 258, but whose official liturgical celebration, together with his companion deacons, was moved to today, August 7, precisely because the 6th is occupied by the greater feast of the Transfiguration of the Lord. Sixtus was seized while celebrating the liturgy in a Roman cemetery on the Appian Way and beheaded by order of Emperor Valerian, together with 4 deacons of his own clergy. Saint Cyprian of Carthage, writing only weeks later, confirmed the Pope's death with those 4 companions, a near contemporary witness, not a later legend. This is worth understanding rather than simply memorizing. The historical date of a martyrdom and the date of its liturgical celebration don't always match. Sixtus's cult is immemorial, predating any formal canonization process, and he was buried in the crypt of the popes, where Pope Damasus later honored his memory. Sixtus's life shows that it is possible to govern with gentleness during religious division, and still surrender everything the moment fidelity truly demands it. In a very different way, a 4th-century bishop is said to have restored, through prayer alone, a chalice shattered during the very celebration of the Eucharist. This is Saint Donatus of Arezzo, bishop and traditionally honored as a martyr, also celebrated on August 7, with his death traditionally placed around the year 362. The oldest and most sober records recall him simply as a bishop and confessor tied to the evangelization of Arezzo, without the dramatic details a later tradition would add. As early as the 6th century, Pope Saint Gregory the Great already knew of his fame and recounted that very story of the shattered chalice, proof of the cult's genuine antiquity, even if not every later detail is historically verifiable. Local tradition considers him the 2nd bishop of the city and holds that he was beheaded under Emperor Julian the Apostate. Donatus is today the official patron of Arezzo and its diocese, where August 7 remains a major patronal solemnity celebrated with great popular devotion to this day. His life teaches that faithfulness to pastoral ministry, sustained humbly across the years, can become living memory spanning more than 15 centuries. Also on this same day, but in 13th-century Sicily, a boy would be born after his parents prayed for years for a child, and would grow up to become one of the greatest Carmelite preachers of his generation. This is Saint Albert of Trapani, Carmelite priest, also celebrated on August 7, with his death placed around the year 1307. Born in Trapani around 1240, Albert belonged to the first generation of Carmelites who left Mount Carmel to adapt to mendicant life and preaching in European cities. Historical records confirm he was already at the Carmelite convent of Trapani in 1280, and ordained a priest by 1289. Transferred later to Messina, he became known for intense prayer, penance, and a style of preaching that deeply moved everyone who heard him. The martyrology mentions conversions and the miraculous provision of food during a besieged city, an episode tradition links to the siege of 1301. Albert also served as provincial of Sicily in 1296 and took part in an international general chapter of his order in 1297. He is today the traditional protector of the Carmelite order and patron of Trapani. His life unites deep contemplation, serious study, and apostolic service that marked an entire region of Sicily for generations. Meanwhile, in a much older time, in 4th century Roman Germania, a woman would become a symbol of conversion and faithfulness in a city that still keeps her memory today. This is Saint Afra of Augsburg, venerated as an early martyr, also celebrated on August 7, with her death traditionally placed around the year 304, during the persecution of Diocletian. What can be affirmed with historical certainty is the very ancient existence of a cult to this martyr in Augsburg. The poet Venantius Fortunatus already testified, in the 6th century, to veneration at her tomb, and archaeology has identified a late antique Christian cemetery exactly where today's basilica dedicated to her now stands. A later tradition, written centuries afterward, added dramatic details about her conversion through Bishop Narcissus and her death by fire, details the Diocese of Augsburg itself acknowledges as devotional elaboration, not documented history. Afra is today the official patroness of the Diocese of Augsburg, one of the city's most important religious figures, with a solemnity kept on this date. Her life teaches that one person's faithful witness, even when many details fade with time, can sustain an entire city's faith across centuries. Back in the 20th century, in Mexico, a quiet, punctual priest would be shot to death in silence, praying his own rosary as he walked toward his execution. This is Saint Miguel de la Mora, diocesan priest and Mexican martyr, also celebrated on August 7, the date of his death in the year 1927. Miguel served the Diocese of Colima as chaplain of the cathedral, described by witnesses as discreet, punctual, and always available to the poor. During the 1920s, conflict between the Mexican government and the church intensified under laws that harshly restricted worship. Colima was among the first states to demand state licenses for priests, which the bishop and clergy refused to accept. Miguel remained in hiding to keep serving the faithful in secret. Discovered and pressured to reopen the cathedral against his bishop's orders, he chose to leave the city instead, but was captured along the road and condemned without a regular trial. At noon on August 7, 1927, he walked silently to the place of execution, took up his rosary, began praying it, and was shot. Pope St. John Paul II canonized him in the year 2000. His life teaches that priestly fidelity, lived out in silence and everyday charity, can become the most eloquent testimony of all. On that same day, but in 19th-century Poland, a young layman would give up his own academic path to devote his entire life to educating poor children of the countryside. This is Blessed Edmund Bojanowski, layman, educator, and founder of a religious congregation, also celebrated on August 7, the date of his death in the year 1871. Born in 1814 into a landowning, deeply religious Polish family, Edmund studied literature, philosophy, and art, but tuberculosis prevented him from finishing his studies. Back in his homeland, he devoted time and resources to libraries, publications, and the education of the rural population, in a Poland then divided among foreign powers. During a cholera epidemic in 1849, he personally organized care for the sick and orphan children. In 1850, he opened the first Okranka, a home for child protection and education, gathering peasant women to serve children and families in need, the beginning of the Congregation of the Servants of Mary Immaculate. Edmund remained a layman his entire life. He attempted to enter seminary late, with fragile health, but was never ordained. He died in 1871, and Pope St. John Paul II called him a forerunner of the lay apostolate later taught by the Second Vatican Council. His life teaches that serving the Church faithfully doesn't require a collar, it requires the will to give whatever you have. In a very different way, in 17th-century England, an elderly priest would be captured on his way to baptize a child, after nearly 5 decades of living in hiding to serve persecuted Catholics. This is Blessed Nicholas Postgate, English missionary priest, also celebrated on August 7, the date of his execution in the year 1679. Ordained a priest in 1629, Postgate returned secretly to England the following year, at a time when a foreign-trained priest could legally be treated as guilty of high treason. For nearly 5 decades, he secretly celebrated Mass and administered the sacraments, traveling long distances across the Yorkshire moors to reach poor Catholic families. Already about 80 years old, he was captured in December 1678, on his way to baptize a child, amid a wave of persecution fueled by a false conspiracy reported in London. Condemned under an old law against foreign ordained priests, he was executed on August 7, 1679. A contemporary pamphlet preserved his final words on the scaffold: "I die not for the plot, but for my religion," and he still prayed for the king and forgave those responsible for his death. His life teaches that forgiving those who take everything from you, even your own life, is the highest form of fidelity to the gospel. Going back even further, to 17th-century Ethiopia, 2 missionaries would be arrested and killed in a land that deeply distrusted foreign religious visitors. These are Blessed Agathangelos of Vendôme and Cajetan of Nantes, French Capuchin priests and missionaries, also celebrated on August 7, with their martyrdom placed in the year 1638, in Gondar. Agathangelos, born in 1598, and Cajetan, born in 1607, spent years working in Middle Eastern missions before joining together in the effort to evangelize Ethiopia. The context was delicate, after earlier conflicts caused by a brief rapprochement between the Ethiopian emperor and Rome. The new Emperor Fasilides had restored the primacy of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and deeply distrusted any foreign missionary. The 2 Capuchins arrived in 1638 seeking reconciliation between the churches, but were arrested only months later. By royal order, tradition says they were hanged from trees with the cords of their own religious habits and stoned to death. Pope Pius X beatified them in 1905. Their shared life teaches that willingness to serve a cause greater than one's own safety, even on foreign and hostile ground, remains a radical form of love for others. And we close today's journey, August 7, going back to late antiquity, to a Roman soldier who would set down his sword to follow Christ, even knowing exactly what it would cost him. This is Saint Victricius of Rouen, former soldier, missionary, and bishop, also celebrated on August 7, with his death placed around the year 407. Before his episcopate, Victricius served in the Roman army. His friend Saint Paulinus of Nola attests that he abandoned his military career to follow Christ, suffered flogging and condemnation, but was eventually set free. He became Bishop of Rouen at the end of the 4th century and traveled across northern Gaul preaching the faith to peoples who had never yet heard the gospel. He also journeyed to Britain to help settle a dispute within the church there, and around the year 396, received relics sent to Rouen from the circle of Saint Ambrose of Milan, delivering, on that occasion, his only surviving work, a sermon on the communion of saints, in which he wrote, "He who heals also lives, he who lives is in the relics," a phrase summing up his deep confidence in the unity between the living and the saints who came before them. And with that story, we close today's 10 saints, and blesseds. If any of these lives touched your heart, subscribe here to Saint of the Day. Comment asking for one of their intercession for someone you love. And most of all, share this video, because every time you share a story like this one, you're not just passing along a video, you're evangelizing. You're carrying the faith to someone who might need to hear exactly this message today. Your share could be the reason someone starts praying again, walks back into a church, or finds hope in a hard moment. And remember, the complete prayer to each of them is right here in the video description.